Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, 14 after 8 o'clock. We are broadcasting live from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, where at about 9 o'clock there is going to be the launch of investment company 274's first listing in Africa, JSE listing of a sukuk. So that's where we're at, and our first interview for the morning with Advocate Shabnam Mayat regarding criticism towards the international community for doing absolutely nothing to press Myanmar's junta to guarantee a safe return of the Rohingya people. The world has done absolutely nothing to ensure safety in Myanmar for its persecuted Rohingya minority, says the Bangladesh foreign minister, complaining that his country is sheltering more than 1 million refugees without support. Advocate Shabnam Mayat, Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program. And you are one of the few advocates in South Africa who has been keeping this story alive, not only in South Africa, but all around the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your efforts. Welcome to the program. And you are going to unpack the story even further for us, this very, very sad story.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for having me on the show this morning.
So, the state of play as far as the Rohingya people are concerned, it seems that they're being pushed about from pillar to post. There's absolutely no future for them. None of the international community or even the neighbors in that part of the world are interested in trying to lighten the burden or the plight of these helpless people in a hopeless situation. How do these people even move forward? A while ago, we'd heard that even education opportunities for them had been barred. So where to from here for the Rohingya people and the future of the children, the Rohingya children?
So the articles or the complaints that you're speaking about come from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh. And what they're complaining about is the fact that Rohingya have not yet been repatriated. This means that, okay, since the genocide in 2017, there have been attempts to send the Rohingya back. But if you think about it, this is not a realistic thing to think about, because these 1 million Rohingya who are in Cox's Bazar fled the brutality of the military junta. And last year, they had a military coup, and there is fighting continuing all over the country with ethnic groups against the junta who have gone into the streets massacring and killing civilians the same way that they did the Rohingya during the 2017 genocide, including the Rohingya who remain in Arakan state. They're all in this conflict. And what needs to happen first is that the country needs to be stabilized, and the international community needs to support the national unity government before they can start sending the Rohingya back. Because in essence, what they'd be doing now is the Arakan army and the military junta are fighting in Arakan state itself, the same way that the junta is fighting ethnic minorities across the country. And in fact, just in the past weeks, we've seen mortar shells end up on the Bangladesh side, and firing ending up on the Bangladeshi side. So people are literally in danger in the country. 200,000 people have been displaced since this fighting began. Is this really a place where you can send 1 million Rohingya back in a safe, dignified, and protected way where they are consulted? I don't think so. And so it's very premature to speak about this, because as you know, in international law, there's a principle of non-refoulement. And this basically means that we cannot send people back to a place where they've been persecuted.
So you have a situation of these Rohingya people who have initially been displaced from their homeland and once again being displaced again for the second or the third time. So they are in total limbo. They have absolutely no future. This is really what we refer to the young people that are not even being schooled. They are going to be what we refer to as the lost generation. Absolutely no hope for them. Or is there? Do you see a light on the horizon, Shabnam, as we speak? Is there any country or is the international community at all interested in easing the burden of the Rohingya people?
Well, the thing is, we have to look for the light at the end of the tunnel. And here, what we can say is that the National Unity Government, this is the government, they were the government in exile, the ones who were deposed during the coup. And they have said that they want to remove the 1982 citizenship law, which removes citizenship from the Rohingya. They also want to work with the International Court of Justice on the genocide case. But the reality is that we have to push for the situation on the ground to improve. And right now, for example, a law is being passed where the raised and emptied villages, because what happened is those 300 or more villages of the Rohingya that were dispossessed in the 2017 genocide, with all the dead bodies and the homes and the 600-year-old masajids and institutions in those countries, or even older ones, they were totally razed to the ground and bulldozed. And the regime is basically now transferring that land where the Rohingya were removed from to the Border Control Police Division. And they're in the process of pushing a law via Home Affairs that allows that to happen. And so even if Rohingya go back, where will they go back to if their land is no longer their own? And this is why we have to support the people's armies and the National Unity Government, stabilize the country, stop doing business with the military junta, because countries still are. And the reality is they're the biggest owners of assets in the country. And as long as they are financially viable for them to keep, running this war, they will. And so it's on all of us to put pressure on our governments to support the people of Myanmar in this difficult time, and also to call for the Rohingya in Bangladesh to be afforded the ability to seek livelihoods, to seek work, for them not to live in camps that are fenced off, and for them not to be sent to flood-prone islands.
So, Shabnam, I also understand that the UN Humanitarian Appeal for the Rohingya refugees has received only a third of
Mhm.
funding required this year. There is obviously growing fears that even less money would be donated next year because of rising costs globally. So, this further exacerbates their dire situation, does it not?
It does, and this is why it's so important to allow them to seek livelihoods in the countries where they are, because then they can contribute and they don't just sit there waiting for a handout. Currently, there are a million people in Cox's Bazar who are not allowed to go and seek work or to build their lives, and those camps are fenced in. And we see now in the news that Malaysia has been pushing back Myanmar nationals. Lots of the countries don't want to take on more refugees. Bangladesh has closed its borders, and now with this fierce fighting in Rakhine State between the Arakan army and the military junta, Rohingya want to cross to safety and are not being allowed to do so. So really, they have to be allowed. Refugees have to be allowed safe passage, and they have to be allowed to seek work. And most importantly, as you mentioned, children need to be educated. And right now, a very small percentage of the children who are currently in the camps have access to school, and most of those are informal because Bangladesh has not allowed the Rohingya children into the formal schooling system.
Okay, I've got one final question for you,
Mhm.
but we also have two messages from our listeners. It is from Roshan Anwar. And Roshan says, we don't need to expect help from non Muslim countries when we have very wealthy countries. They can't help these innocent, helpless people instead of wasting their money for unnecessary works. I think the probably the suggestion is a comment regarding Muslim countries. Let's take the next message, also from Roshan Anwar.
Mhm.
Muslim countries have more than enough to assist these innocent, helpless people. That's from Roshan Anwar.
Mhm.
But obviously, Shabnam, you and I know that the rich Muslim countries in the Middle East seem to have their own agendas. I've not, till today, correct me if I'm wrong, I've not heard of any Muslim country
Mhm.
come to the aid of the Rohingya people.
Well, I mean, let's include the case, right? Because at the International Court of Justice, it is the Gambia, a small African Muslim country that has brought the case despite all the countries with huge resources, right? So at the end of the day, they've shown us, the Gambia has shown us that we don't have to worry about who is rich and who is mighty, but we have to consider and work with those who believe in rights and who want to work towards the upliftment of the dispossessed, right? And Gambia is doing a wonderful job because they've brought this, and now slowly other countries will be joining them. But the other thing is, yes, we're always waiting for countries with resources to take the steps, but what about the steps that all of us can take? Because if huge countries and big organizations are not going to do the work, it's still on all of us to do little things, because at the end of the day, all these little things, they add up. And so what about us putting pressure on our organizations and our governments to at least say something about Myanmar, say something about the situation in Bangladesh, and to support local organizations that are doing wonderful work, whether it's humanitarian or advocacy work for the Rohingya, or even organizations based in other countries. So yes, while we are waiting and we want to put pressure on embassies and other countries and richer Muslim countries, I think it's also important to take the steps that we can instead of just waiting.
Okay, Shabnam, we've run out of time, but very quickly, a short answer to my next question. I understand that the US has offered to resettle some of the Rohingya people, but it would need several other countries to make similar offers to significantly ease the burden of the Bangladeshis. Your thoughts?
So other countries have resettled very small amounts of Rohingya, whether it's small communities in Australia or Canada or the US or even in Europe. But the reality is that refugees have the right to their home, and they also have the right to a life in the countries where they are. So while we wait for 100 or 200 or 70 or 40 to be relocated, what will happen to the million that are still waiting in Cox's Bazar? And I think that's where the emphasis should lie.
And that's where we leave it. Let's hope that this very strong, sad message gets through to the heart of the people watching and listening to us today. And as you indicated, collectively, we can all do little things which can make a huge difference. Advocate Shibna Mayat, thank you indeed for holding up that flag for the rights of the Rohingya people. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
It is exactly 8:26 a.m. News and views on Salam Media. We are broadcasting live from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Our next interview is with Vice President of the Minara Chamber of Commerce, and that, of course, is Fawzia Peer, to talk to us about the Minara Business Awards, and that will be coming to you in a minute or two.